So this is not a Trae Young hate video. I want to say that in the first couple of seconds. The Hawks made a head coaching change in the last month, and they look like a more functional team. They should be the 4 or 5 seed by the end of the regular season, and a lot of that has to do with Trae Young having the best stretch of winning basketball in his career. He's been dominating in every aspect of the pick and roll, but there's still a level Trae can get to by the time he's 25 or 26 as the franchise player. This video is more of a long-term look at his career and what's next for him after becoming an all-star in the face of a team. He's not going to be Steph Curry, but there is something that Steph figured out in his career that Trae should be able to figure out as well. I was reading an article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and to give a small recap, it's basically talking about Trae's development of trusting his teammates late in games and minimizing his mistakes as the main ball handler. You get quotes from head coach Nate McMillan and assistant coaches saying what Trae did as a passer in the fourth quarter against the Chicago Bulls last week was something he wouldn't have done earlier in the season. He would have been too late on recognizing what the defense was doing, get caught up, and force himself into a bad shot that he didn't need to do. You see the numbers, you see the points, the assists, they all look great, but there's some fine tuning as a decision maker that will make or break what Trae finishes out as a player. Trae knows this, he mentions that in the article. He's learning how to trust his teammates more and learning where guys like Bogdanovich like the ball, if he likes getting the ball off a pin down or a flare screen, and getting to his teammates' spots first before his own shot. In a loss against the Heat about a month ago, Trae wasn't that great handling the ball down the stretch and said after the game he needs to do better of making shots and leading the team better down the stretch. He shot 3 of 14 and turned the ball over 7 times. The Heat's defense was swarming him and he wasn't in tune with his teammates. Stuff like that is going to happen in the playoffs and random regular season games against really good defenses, and the frustrations that come from not being in sync with your main ball handler will build up to a point where someone like John Collins will blow up on you in practice. If you remember a few months ago, it came out that John wasn't too happy in a film session with how the Hawks were playing on offense with Trae Young. Collins wanted to get into the offensive sets more quickly, he wanted more shots for himself, and for Trae to limit those early shot clock heaves. Now I know those two got past that and Atlanta is probably going to re-sign him this summer, but the real test of this dynamic is going to be in the playoffs when you're going against a coaching and scouting staff that focuses all of its time on stopping Trae Young and trying to force him to go to his bad habits. The way James Harden, Luka Doncic, LeBron James have played on offense in the previous years only really works if you have the right role players around you. The Rockets had PJ Tucker and Trevor Ariza. That one year with the Cavs, they had Jeff Green, Kevin Love, George Hill, J.R. Smith. They understood their roles. Even Luka in his first year, some of the guys on the team weren't a huge fan of that offense, even though it was obvious the Luka show was the best way for the future. It's slightly different for Trae in Atlanta because not all of his teammates are standstill shooters. He has guys who have proven that can score in different ways from multiple spots. The way Harden played in Houston, even if it couldn't get past the Warriors, he had multiple counters with his dribble to make it so he's a little unpredictable. Plus he's 6'5", 220 pounds, and can throw his body into you. With Trae, it's a little bit different because he's not as physically big as those guys, and John Collins, Danilo Gallinari, and Bogdanovich aren't wired like 33-year-old PJ Tucker and Trevor Ariza. Making your teammates happy, making sure they get their shots where they're most comfortable, being unpredictable on offense, and taking care of the ball down the stretch is something Steph Curry was able to figure out in his career. Of course, we know about the three-point shooting, but Steph was able to leverage his three-point shooting and other strengths on offense to make everyone around him better. That's what really makes Steph an all-time great. Not only was he able to do this in the regular season, but he was able to do it in the playoffs against great defenses. One of the first signings that helped the Warriors' early playoff success was when they got Andrew Bogut in a trade. He was the starting center for that 2015 championship team, and recently in a podcast, he broke down what made Steph different from other guys in the league. Once Steph realized that, hey, if some of these role players are helping me, if I can get them going early, Andre Iguodala hits a 3, Bogut gets a dunk, David Lee gets a finger roll, and I get everyone involved without being overly trying to get them involved because there's a difference. Steph knew that he'd have a 3 or 4 minute block that once everyone else has hit a shot and flattened out that defense and made it a bit more honest, he'd have a 3-minute block where he'd score 16 points. Bogut said once he saw Steph doing this, it was over, and it was over because Steph not only was doing this in the regular season, but this translated into the playoffs against the best defenses in the league. Once you've made it so your teammates are in rhythm for 4 or 5 months in a row, it's not going to matter too much how good the other defense is because they have to react to that offense first. It's second nature. Of course, there's going to be times where the defense gets stops and your secondary actions get shut down, but because the main ball handler has already established that relationship in previous games on the court, you can fight through adversity in the playoffs easier. You sort of saw this back in 2015 when David Lee was no longer getting the minutes he was used to. He was a two-time All-Star and getting paid $15 million to sit the bench. In the playoffs that year, Lee was cut out of the rotation, but Steph kept letting him know, look, you're not out of this thing, we're going to really need you. And they did need David Lee in those playoffs. In the second round of the playoffs that year, they went down 2-1 against the Memphis Grizzlies. Mo Spates got injured, and David Lee came in the last few games of that series and helped out. He didn't put up great numbers, but he did help. I think the power of Steph, similar to Tim Duncan, is being able to manage egos and adapting to whatever the roster needs. Being completely cool with KD taking over, winning finals MVPs and making sure he's comfortable on offense, getting Andre Iguodala to take on a lesser role from when he was in Denver, and just being that reliable, steady franchise player through the bad and good times. I see fire Steve Kerr stuff all the time on Twitter, but it'll never happen because Steph is so bought in. Now apply that Andrew Bogut quote and everything else to what Nate McMillan and Atlanta's assistant coaches were saying to Trae in that article I mentioned. That's his next development. I think some of the bad you've seen from Trae has to do with the fact that he was made the franchise as a 20-year-old. You're going to have some good moments, but a lot of the time you're going to get some of his worst flaws because you've given this young guy all this influence, and now when another person wants to share some of that power, you might have a problem. I know DeAndre Hunter is injured, but when he gets going again, I want to see Trae turn him into an all-star player he can become, because if your teammates are improving, that's just going to make it easier for you to find your offense. It'll be more difficult to defend you one-on-one because the team is also worried about defending DeAndre Hunter or somebody else. When you're the franchise, when you're the point guard, you set the tempo in practice and in games. You got to make sure everyone is happy, everyone is in rhythm, making sure the whole team is bought in. Steph kept David Lee bought in even though he was just handing out water for most of the playoffs. No one is going to be Steph, and it's unfair to put that on someone. But when I'm personally judging Trae as a player, I'm going to be judging him as an orchestrator of a team offense. You get to put up big numbers and you get the ball, but you also got to do the other stuff we as fans don't see on the court. And that's what Trae's been trying to do these last couple months from what I've been reading. And by the time he's 25, 26 years old, more established, can you build something with your teammates that can get you to an NBA Finals, a conference finals year in and year out? What Trae is doing on offense since Nate McMillan has been the head coach has been really under-discussed. Unless you're like Drew Holiday, Trae has been basically getting whatever he wants. I think some of the Trae conversation can go overboard into the negatives. The Hawks are getting some of the guys they got in free agency back healthy, and they're looking better since they fired Lloyd Pierce. There's some strong criticism, but at the same time, the Trae Young era in Atlanta is going to get judged in 10 to 15 years by how much team success they have in the playoffs. Unfair or fair, he is always going to get compared to Luka in the 2018 draft, and Luka is likely to have a lot of playoff success as well, even in a more difficult conference. Again, I'm totally fine with the Lloyd Pierce firing. It was clear he needed to go, but if you're the number one and you're tuning out the coach, everyone else is going to tune out as well. If you're locked into the head coach and everyone is bought in and taking care of everything on and off the court, that's how you form an elite culture. And if Trae is bought in with Nate McMillan, then everyone from him to the last guy on the bench will be bought in as well. Trae is not going to be Steph, but he can replicate some other things if he wants to. And that's it for me. Let me know how you're feeling about Trae Young and the Hawks moving into the 4th seed of the Eastern Conference. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like as it does help the channel do better, and consider subscribing if you want to see more from me.